The sky that morning wasn't quite right. Laura Bennett stood at the kitchen sink of her old two-story home in Salem, Massachusetts, her hands motionless under the running water. Outside, the clouds were rolling low and fast, casting long shadows over the autumn-colored trees. There was something in the air, something she couldn't name, but felt in her bones. Not the chill of October, something older, heavier. "Mommy, the clouds look like wolves today," Emma's voice echoed from the living room. The little girl was crouched by the window, drawing in the condensation with her tiny finger. Her curly hair caught the morning light, a halo over a furrowed brow. Laura forced a smile and wiped her hands. "Yes, they do, but we don't have time for stories today, sweetie. Your dad's got a big trip, remember." Right on cue, footsteps creaked down the upstairs hallway. David Bennett, tall and sharp in his navy suit, descended the staircase with his phone in one hand and a half-finished coffee in the other. His presence filled the room like perfume that lingered too long, appealing on the surface but cloying underneath. "I've got a make-or-break pitch in New York this weekend," he said, leaning down to kiss Emma's head. "Be good, my little star. I'll bring you something amazing when I get back." Emma looked up at him, her big brown eyes uncertain. "Promise?" David smiled, white teeth smooth charm. "Promise." Laura watched silently as he picked up his briefcase. Her gaze lingered on his wristwatch. Expensive new. She didn't remember seeing it before. He hadn't said who gifted it, or when. She glanced at the calendar. 3 months since her mother died. 3 months since David had changed, ever so slightly. The longer work hours. The late-night phone calls in the garage. The way he flinched when she entered a room without warning. And now this trip. "I spoke to Mom," David added, casually adjusting his tie. "She's coming by Sunday." Laura blinked. "Gloria's coming here?" "She misses Emma." Of course, Gloria missed Emma, but not Laura. Never Laura. To her, Laura had always been the barely tolerated daughter-in-law who took David off his path. Everything Gloria ever said came sugar-coated, but sharp-edged. "I'll make up the guest room," Laura said flatly. David leaned in and whispered in her ear, "You don't have to like her. Just don't make things weird while I'm gone." And just like that, he was out the door. The house went quiet. Emma's laughter broke the silence for a moment as she danced across the floor with her plush rabbit, but Laura's thoughts stayed tangled. She moved into her study, the one her mother used to sit in, filled with old books and boxes of paintings yet to be catalogued. She had been meaning to go through her mother's belongings, but every time she tried, something stopped her. The smell of lavender in the drawers, the faint pencil marks on old museum sketches. The memories were still too raw. Then, like a whisper, a voice cut through her thoughts. "Mommy, Grandma told me a secret." Laura turned. Emma stood in the doorway, holding a dusty photograph of Laura as a child. Her eyes gleamed, not with mischief, but something else, something older. "What secret, honey?" Emma shook her head. She said, "I could only tell you when it's time." Laura smiled faintly, trying not to show the chill that ran down her spine. "You dreamt about Grandma again." Emma nodded, but it wasn't just a dream this time. Laura walked over and knelt down, cupping her daughter's cheek. "We'll talk about it later, okay? Let's just have breakfast." But inside, something had already shifted. Outside the window, the clouds began to gather again, and Laura could have sworn they looked like they were watching. The next day, Laura stood in the sunroom, flipping through the schedule for the Salem Women's Art Society while Emma sprawled across the floor nearby, sketching with colored pencils. Outside, the golden leaves fluttered gently down the driveway, and the whole scene should have felt peaceful, but it didn't. Laura's phone buzzed. A text from David. "Leaving earlier than planned. Need to prep more. I'll call tonight." She stared at the screen for a long moment, rereading the message. He was supposed to leave tomorrow. Why the sudden change? Emma looked up from her drawing. "Daddy's going early?" Laura nodded slowly. Seems like it. Emma didn't say anything, but her pencil stopped moving. That evening, as Laura stirred soup on the stove, she noticed Emma sitting unusually still on the living room rug. The flicker of the fireplace cast tall shadows across the walls, and Emma's eyes seemed locked on something invisible, somewhere far away. "What are you thinking about, love?" Emma turned, her voice barely above a whisper. "I saw Daddy and Grandma talking on his phone in the garage." Laura's hand paused mid-stir. "When?" "Yesterday. I was looking for my stuffed bunny. They didn't know I was there." "And what were they talking about?" Emma hesitated. "I couldn't hear much. Just a few words. Daddy said, 'She'll never see it coming.' And Grandma said, 'Perfect. It has to look natural.'" The spoon slipped from Laura's hand, clinking hard against the pot. She wiped her palms, trying to keep her voice calm. "Emma, sweetheart, you must have misunderstood. Grown-ups say all sorts of silly things." But Emma didn't smile, didn't blink. Her voice came steady. "I didn't misunderstand. Daddy was holding house papers, and he pointed to something in the hallway." Laura felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. She didn't want to admit it, but part of her had already known. The strange behavior, the hollow affection, the way David had been avoiding her eyes for weeks. "Time for bed," she said, her voice too light. "Come on, honey. I'll read you your favorite." "No," Emma said quickly, standing up. "I want to sleep in your room." Laura raised an eyebrow. "What's wrong with your room?" "There's something off. I feel it." Laura tried to laugh it off, but Emma didn't budge. Her little fingers clutched the hem of her mother's sweater. "Please." That night, as Emma lay curled beside her, Laura stared at the ceiling, wide awake. Her thoughts ran in spirals around her mother's sudden death, the insurance policy David insisted they signed together a month ago, his repeated questions about whether she'd updated her will. And then there was Emma. Why would a 6-year-old invent something so specific? At 2:14 a.m., Laura sat alone in the study, the glow of the desk lamp illuminating a stack of unopened folders. She hadn't meant to go through David's things, but something pulled her to the bottom drawer. To her surprise, it wasn't locked tonight. Inside, nestled under plain documents, was a red envelope labeled Policy, Laura Bennett. Her hands shook as she opened it. A life insurance contract. High payout. Beneficiary, David Bennett. Date issued 3 weeks after her mother's funeral. The floor beneath her seemed to vanish. She leaned back in the chair, her eyes fixed on the papers, and then she remembered what Emma had said about it having to look natural. The house creaked. A car drove slowly down the road outside, headlights casting shadows against the window blinds. Laura turned off the lamp and sat in darkness, not because she was afraid, because now she believed her daughter. The following morning, the silence in the house felt calculated. Laura stood by the kitchen window, clutching a lukewarm mug of tea, watching the wind ripple through the backyard. The trees didn't sway, so much as shudder. A strange sense of pressure weighed on the air, like the moments before a thunderstorm, but colder. Emma appeared in the hallway, already dressed, her bunny clutched to her chest. "Mommy," she whispered, "we have to leave soon." Laura turned slowly. "Leave?" Emma nodded. Her voice dropped, fragile and urgent. "We have to go before Daddy comes back." Laura walked over, crouched to her daughter's eye level. "Emma, is this about what you said yesterday?" "Yes," she whispered. "And something else." Laura's stomach twisted. Emma pulled a crumpled paper from her pocket. A house plan. An old blueprint. Where had she? "I found it in Daddy's study drawer." "The one under the safe," Emma said softly. "He was looking at it. I saw him last week. He circled something here." She pointed to a long hallway leading to the back door, marked Secured Access. Laura's breath caught. The door hadn't been replaced since the 40s. There was no reason for it to be secured. And then Emma added almost inaudibly, he was on the phone. He said, perfect. No one will know how it happened. By noon, Laura's nerves were fraying. David hadn't answered any of her texts. Gloria had called once earlier, her tone clipped strange. Has David arrived yet? She asked. No. Why? Just let me know when he does. The call ended before Laura could respond. The second she hung up, she heard it, a car engine. Low, slow, pulling up just beyond the hedge. She moved toward the window and froze. A man in a black coat stood beside an unfamiliar SUV, phone to his ear, scanning the house. Not pacing, not lost, watching. Laura pulled Emma close. We're staying inside today, sweetie. The rest of the afternoon passed like glass cracking under pressure, quiet but ready to shatter. Laura double-checked all the doors, then checked them again. Her heart wouldn't slow down. That night, Emma refused to go to her room. I'm staying with you again, she insisted, her voice trembling. Laura hesitated. Emma, are you scared because of what you heard? Emma nodded quickly. Mommy, I saw the garage door move. I think someone came inside. Laura wanted to tell her daughter she was wrong, that nothing was happening, that it was all a misunderstanding. But her hands were shaking too much to lie. She tucked Emma into bed beside her and turned out the lights. At 2:08 a.m., Laura's phone buzzed. A message from David. Coming home early. Big conversation ahead. Be up. No emojis. No hearts. No smiley faces like he always used with Emma. Just cold text. She didn't reply. She lay there, wide-eyed, staring at the ceiling. Beside her, Emma shifted slightly and whispered, Mommy, we have to run now. Laura turned. Her daughter's eyes were wide open. She wasn't asleep. She wasn't dreaming. What? He's coming, Emma whispered. We have to go. There's no time. Laura's blood ran cold. From the hallway came the sound of the front lock clicking. Her pulse roared in her ears. Metal slammed. One. Then another. All windows, shutters dropping, mechanical and final. They were being sealed in. Laura sprang out of bed, grabbed her coat, her bag. Cash, passport, phone, the locket her mother left behind. Emma, shoes on. Now. The back door wouldn't turn. The knob jammed. It's locked from the outside, Emma whispered. Laura swore under her breath. Then came it, the smell. Thick, sour, unmistakable. Gasoline. She grabbed Emma's hand. We need another way. The fire hadn't started yet, but it would. Any moment now. Mommy, Emma's voice was calm now. Too calm. There's a hidden door behind the pantry. It leads underground. Laura blinked. What? I saw it. In my dream. Grandma showed me. A crashing noise came from the living room. Someone inside. Without hesitation, Laura followed her daughter into the kitchen. Emma was already pulling aside the lower shelves. And behind the canned goods, a narrow door no one would have noticed. The door creaked open with the sound of rusted hinges scraping against time itself. A dark, narrow passage yawned before them, cold and damp, barely wider than Laura's shoulders. Dust clung to the walls like cobwebs from another century. The air smelled of old stone and fear. Emma, Laura whispered, her voice barely more than breath. How do you know this place is real? Emma glanced back at her mother, her tiny hand clutching Bunny tighter than ever. Grandma showed me, she said calmly. In the dream, she said, if things go bad, take the pantry door. Laura hesitated. The smell of gasoline was thicker now. Something upstairs crashed. The sound of footsteps. Boots. Time was up. She nodded once. You go first. Stay close to the wall. Crawl if you have to. Emma didn't flinch. She dropped to her knees and disappeared into the shadows. Laura followed, her heart pounding so loud it echoed inside her skull. The passage tilted downward, forcing her to crouch. Her hands scraped against jagged stone. Every breath was a gasp of stale air and adrenaline. Behind them, crackling, a low roar. The house was beginning to burn. They crawled in silence for what felt like hours. Laura's knees screamed. Her throat was raw from breathing smoke-tainted air. Her bag kept bumping into her ribs with every shuffle. "Are you okay?" Emma's voice floated back. "I'm with you," Laura panted. "Keep going." "Almost there," Emma said. "It comes out by the garden shed." Laura stopped. "How do you know?" Emma didn't turn around. "I just do." A rumble shook the tunnel. Dust rained from above. Laura's mind raced. Was the fire spreading this far down? Would the walls collapse? But then a sliver of light, faint but there. At the end of the narrow corridor stood a crooked wooden panel. Emma pushed it gently. The wood groaned, then gave way. They spilled out into a low, dirt-floored room, cold, silent, and forgotten. The inside of the shed's underground chamber. Old tools, rusted chains, jars of who knows what. The smell of earth was overwhelming, but blessedly free of smoke. Laura hoisted Emma up the wooden stairs. The door above them creaked open. And just like that, morning air. Cool, crisp, freedom. They emerged behind the shed at the far end of the backyard, the burning house blocked by trees. But they could see it, black smoke twisting into the sky like the fingers of a monster. Sirens wailed in the distance. "Come on," Laura whispered. "We have to move." They cut through the neighbor's lawn, Laura carrying Emma now, feet soaked with dew, heart threatening to burst. They reached the porch of Janelle Carter's house, just as flames burst through the second-story windows behind them. Laura pounded on the door with her fist. "Janelle!" Inside, a light flicked on. The door opened. Janelle, in her robe, blinked. "Laura." Laura could barely stand. "Call the police," she gasped. "David, he tried to kill us." Emma clung to her mother's coat. Ash streaked across her cheeks. For a moment, Janelle didn't move. Then she grabbed the phone. "Get inside. Now." Laura collapsed onto the couch. Her knees gave out. Emma crawled onto her lap, her breath shallow but steady. Outside, the house roared in agony. Inside, the truth began to rise from the flames. Laura sat stiffly on the floral-patterned couch in Janelle's living room, a borrowed blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Emma curled beside her like a frightened animal. The smell of smoke clung to them both, stubborn and sickening. Laura could still feel the heat of the fire crawling up her back. Across the room, Janelle was pacing with her cordless phone pressed to her ear. "Yes, they're safe now," she said urgently. "No injuries, but they need help. You need to send someone now." The sound of approaching sirens filled the neighborhood. Laura blinked hard, trying to focus. Her mind buzzed with too many things at once. The hidden tunnel, the life insurance papers, the man in the black coat, and above all, David's voice in her head. It has to look natural. She reached for her purse with trembling hands and pulled out the red envelope. "Janelle," she whispered hoarsely, "can you get me a glass of water and something to write on?" Janelle brought her a notepad, but Laura shook her head. "No, not to write. I need to show the police this. It's insurance. He took out a policy. In my name. Just after my mother passed." Janelle's eyes widened, her voice dropping. "Oh, my God!" There was a knock at the door. Flashing lights danced against the windows. 2 officers and a fire marshal stood outside, one already radioing in the blaze engulfing the Bennett house down the road. Laura stood up too fast. "Detective, you need to listen to me. This wasn't an accident." The older officer, Detective Marsh, looked her over skeptically. "Ma'am, you were in that house?" Laura nodded. "My husband locked me and my daughter inside. He set the fire. We escaped through an old tunnel behind the pantry." Detective Marsh glanced at the other officer. "That's a serious claim." "I have proof," Laura said quickly, holding up the envelope. Insurance. He took it out right after my mother died. And my daughter, she heard him, planning it, with his mother. At that, Marsh's brow furrowed. He stepped forward and gently took the documents from her hands, flipping through them. You say he left earlier for a business trip? He never left, Laura said. He texted me last night, said he'd be back early. Then everything started shutting down. The house was rigged. Emma, still wrapped in the blanket, looked up. He said, If Mommy's gone, everything becomes mine. I heard it. Marsh turned to Emma, his tone softer now. Where were you when you heard that, sweetheart? Outside his study, she said. He didn't know I was listening. He was talking on the phone with Grandma Gloria. Laura felt her heart break at the steadiness in Emma's voice. She was so small, yet she sounded so certain. So much older than 6. More officers arrived, along with fire investigators who cordoned off the area and began their preliminary assessment. One of them walked back up the porch an hour later, his expression grim. Detective, he said, we've got clear signs of accelerants, gasoline, spread along the baseboards. Also, something weird with the security system. All windows and doors locked from outside. Someone rewired it to lock remotely. Marsh's face hardened. Get an APB out for David Bennett, he ordered. Now. By sunset, news came in. David had been located at a gas station along the interstate, trying to withdraw cash with a false ID. A large duffel bag of burner phones, cash, and travel documents was found in his trunk. When confronted, he screamed in the interrogation room, It wasn't me. It was my mother's idea. She pushed me. Hours later, Gloria Bennett was arrested at her home. She didn't resist. She didn't even flinch. But when informed that David was placing the blame squarely on her, something cracked in her perfectly composed mask. That ungrateful boy, she hissed. After everything I did for him, everything I gave up, her voice trembled. I did it for him. 3 months later, the courtroom was silent. The only sound was the shuffle of papers and the ticking of a wall clock, steady like a countdown. The trial of David Bennett and Gloria Bennett had captured statewide attention. The headlines called it the Salem Inferno case, but to Laura it wasn't just a case. It was her life and almost her death. She sat in the front row, hands clasped tightly, watching as the prosecution laid out the evidence. Blueprints of the house, marked with escape route modifications. The tampered security system, reprogrammed to lock from the outside. Traces of gasoline along the floorboards. Life insurance documents, signed just after her mother's death. Call logs between David and Gloria, dozens of them, right before the fire. David's attorney tried to plead diminished responsibility, claiming stress, manipulation, confusion, even suggesting Laura might have set the fire herself. The room murmured in disbelief. Then David shifted strategies. It was all her, he said, pointing at his mother across the courtroom. She pushed me. She said Laura was ruining my life. She said if we just got rid of her, we could start over with the money. Gasps filled the gallery. Gloria stood, her face hard as stone. I sacrificed everything for you, she hissed, loud enough for the whole room to hear. I gave you everything, and you still blame me? Her mask shattered. She confessed, not to starting the fire, but to helping plan it. Laura was poison, she said, her voice trembling with fury. She stole my son's future. I thought, if she disappeared, maybe David could become the man he was meant to be. But it wasn't her voice that shifted the jury. It was Emma's. The courtroom adjusted the mic to her height. She wore a small blue dress, her hair tied back in a ribbon, bunny tucked under her arm. State your name, please. Emma Bennett. And how old are you? 6.5. Emma, the prosecutor said gently, can you tell the jury what you heard that night? Emma nodded. Daddy was on the phone. He didn't know I was outside the study. He said, if Mommy is gone, everything becomes mine. Gasps echoed again. Laura closed her eyes. "And what else?" He said, "We just need to make it look like an accident." A pause. "Did you tell anyone?" "I told Mommy," Emma whispered. "And I told Bunny." The courtroom chuckled softly at that. But there were tears in the eyes of at least 3 jurors. "And how did you know about the secret tunnel?" "Grandma told me," Emma said simply. There was silence. "Your Grandma Gloria?" Emma shook her head. "No, Mommy's Mommy. In my dream. She said, 'If things go bad, follow the pantry door.' So I did." The silence stretched long and deep. Even the judge blinked slowly, visibly moved. Emma smiled slightly. Grandma was right. When the verdict was read, Laura couldn't breathe. Guilty, on all counts. David, 15 years in state prison for attempted arson, attempted murder, and insurance fraud. Gloria, 8 years for conspiracy and accessory to attempted murder. But it wasn't the sentencing that stuck with Laura. It was the moment David turned around, expecting someone, anyone, to look at him with sympathy. No one did, not even his mother. And when Gloria was led away in cuffs, her final words were barely a whisper. "I did everything for my son, and now I have nothing." Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions, but Laura shielded Emma with her coat and kept walking. They didn't need headlines. They had each other, and more than that, they had truth. 6 months later, the world had settled into a different rhythm. The new house Laura bought sat at the edge of a quiet street in a small New England town. Not grand, not historic, not full of ghosts. Just safe. The garden was modest, the roof a little slanted, but the air was light here. The shadows were honest. That afternoon, Laura stood by the kitchen window, sipping tea, watching leaves dance across the stone walkway. Emma's backpack lay by the door, her tiny boots streaked with sidewalk chalk from art class. The sun poured into the house like forgiveness. "Mommy!" Emma's voice rang from outside. A moment later, she burst through the door, holding a drawing. Her cheeks were pink from the cold, eyes bright with pride. "My picture got picked for the art exhibition. Ms. Hill said it's going on the front wall." Laura crouched, taking the drawing with a smile. It was a crayon depiction of 3 women, Emma, Laura, and a woman with gray hair in a garden full of stars. "Is that Grandma?" Laura asked gently. Emma nodded. "She's watching us. She helps me feel brave." Laura pressed a kiss to her daughter's forehead. "She'd be so proud of you." They sat together by the fireplace that evening, curled up in thick blankets. A small tree twinkled in the corner. Emma had insisted they put it up early for Christmas. Dr. Thomas Avery, Emma's counselor and now a close friend, joined them just before dinner. He brought cinnamon rolls and laughter. Over the months, his visits had become more frequent, at first as a therapist, then as something gentler, quieter, someone who fit. Emma had noticed too. "Mommy," she asked later, when Thomas had stepped outside to take a call, "what's a real family?" Laura looked at her for a long moment. "It's not about blood," she said. "It's about love, about being safe, about choosing each other every day." Emma thought for a while, then smiled. "That's why we made it, because we're a real family now." Laura felt something bloom in her chest. It wasn't relief. It wasn't survival. It was beginning. Later that night, Laura was organizing a few old boxes from her mother's things. Among the art books and letters, she found a notebook tied with ribbon. Inside, folded delicately, was a handwritten letter. "Laura, if you're reading this, I've probably already left this world. There's something I want to warn you about. David came to me for money. He was charming but desperate. I checked into his company. It's a lie. Please protect Emma. And protect yourself. If anything happens to me suddenly, don't assume it's natural." Mom Laura closed the letter with shaking hands. Her mother had known. She had seen it coming. Maybe that's why Emma saw it too. The next morning, Laura submitted the letter to the police. A new investigation into her mother's death was opened, and this time no detail would be overlooked. On Christmas Eve, the three of them sat together, Laura, Emma, and Thomas, watching snow fall in gentle swirls through the window. Music played softly from the radio. No sirens, no flames, just peace. "Can Michael become part of our family?" Emma asked suddenly, looking up at Thomas with innocent curiosity. Thomas chuckled, glancing at Laura, who blushed despite herself. "We'll talk about that," he said gently. "Together." Emma grinned, then nestled against her mother's side. Laura looked at the fire, at the new warmth surrounding her, and whispered into her daughter's hair. "Your courage saved our lives and gave us this new one." And as snow blanketed the roof above them, Laura Bennett closed her eyes for just a moment, grateful, grounded, and finally free.